That night, when Napoleon Bonaparte was the master of Europe, he had actually already lost everything. Only nobody had noticed it yet, not even himself. On that gloomy December evening in 1812, walking through the dark corridors of the Tuileries Palace, the world's most powerful man was completely alone. As his shadow danced on the walls in the flickering candlelight, the silent scream inside him never stopped. But nobody could hear the sound of that scream, because everyone who was close enough to listen to Napoleon Bonaparte's heart had either died, betrayed him, or was yet to betray him. The letter in his hand was trembling, or were his hands trembling? He couldn't tell the difference anymore. Moscow was burning. 600,000 men were freezing to death. And in the palace in Paris, young Marie-Louise, whom he had married after divorcing Queen Josephine, was perhaps whispering another man's name right now. Maybe not. Maybe it was just his mind playing these games. But Napoleon's mind had become his greatest enemy, because the line between genius and madness was about to be completely erased that night. The beginning. Little Napoleon's big dream, 1769, Corsica. Napoleone Bonaparte, born in a small town on a small island, didn't cry when he came into the world. The midwife had looked at the baby with fear. Children born silent are either dead or, she had whispered. She hadn't dared to finish, because old legends considered children born silent to be cursed. Perhaps they were right. Little Napoleon spoke his first word late, but when he did, it was a complete command. Give. He had his first fight at 6 years old. At 10, he designed his first military strategy, only with stones and imagination. When he was admitted to France's military school at 12, the aristocratic children laughed at him. Corsican peasant boy, they had said. He can't even speak French properly. Napoleon never forgot those laughs. Every night in his bed, in the darkness, he heard those laughs, and he made a vow. One day, you will all kneel before me. But he didn't know yet that taking revenge would be easier than being able to taste victory. In his first year at military school, he had no friends. During breaks, he would stand alone in the corner, drawing strategies in a small notebook. The teachers found him strange. He didn't play ball like the other children, didn't wrestle, didn't joke around. He just thought, planned, dreamed. There's something wrong with this child, said a teacher in the dining hall. He'll either go mad or... He couldn't finish his sentence, because the answer was too obvious but too dangerous to say. When he became an artillery officer at 16, Napoleon's eyes were different now, cold, calculating, merciless. But at the same time, a fire he couldn't control was burning inside him. Every night he would stand in front of the mirror and ask himself this question: who cares? Nobody. Nobody cared yet, but they would. They had to. Because Napoleon Bonaparte was deathly afraid of being abandoned, and there was only one way to suppress this fear. Become so powerful that nobody can abandon you. Become so indispensable that your name cannot be forgotten. But the real question was, how powerful can a person become to be indispensable? The rise. The man who discovered genius. France was in chaos. The king had been beheaded at the guillotine. Aristocrats were fleeing. The streets were in blood. And young artillery officer Napoleon Bonaparte was looking for his last chance to prove himself during the siege of the city of Toulon. Commanders were shouting in the meeting room, "The English have seized the port. We cannot retake the city. Perhaps we make a deal." A deal? The Republic doesn't make deals with cities that betray. Napoleon was standing silently in the corner, looking at the map. And he had seen something everyone else had missed. "With your permission," he said in that cold voice. The commanders turned to him. "Who is this little Corsican?" "We don't need to take the city," said Napoleon, pointing at the map. "We only need to take this hill. From here we can sink every ship controlling the port. The English will be forced to retreat." The room fell silent. "That's suicide," someone said. "No," said Napoleon. "It's mathematics." 3 days later, Napoleon's plan worked. The British fleet fled, Toulon fell, and the 24-year-old artillery officer became a general overnight. But the truly shocking thing was what Napoleon said during the battle. When a cannonball passed by him and exploded on the ground, the soldier next to him had screamed in fear, "Commander, we must retreat." Napoleon had replied coldly, "A man who fears death is already dead." In that moment, something broke in Napoleon Bonaparte's heart. Perhaps this was his last human part. He no longer feared death, because there was something worse than death, being forgotten. And this is exactly when everything changed. Paris, 1795. Napoleon was still an unrecognized general, but a rebellion had broken out in the city. Royalist insurgents had poured into the streets. The Republican government was desperate. "Someone must suppress this rebellion," said Barras, the government's strongman. "But who?" "There's that Corsican artilleryman," someone said. "The one who took Toulon. What's his name?" "Bonaparte. Napoleon Bonaparte." Barras shrugged. "Give him a chance." Napoleon used his chance well. He aimed the cannons directly at the crowd and gave the order to fire. Hundreds of people died. The streets turned into a pool of blood, but the rebellion was suppressed. That night, Napoleon sat alone in his bed. His hands were clean, but what he felt inside was dirty. "I had to kill them," he whispered to himself, "to obtain power." But a voice answered from within, "So what will you do with this power now?" He didn't know the answer yet, but he would learn. And when he learned, there would be no turning back. Because once you taste power, you can't live without it. It becomes like breathing, something you need. And Napoleon Bonaparte could no longer remain powerless, just as he couldn't remain breathless. Josephine. Love or obsession? The woman who entered Napoleon's life was the woman who would bring his end. But he didn't know it. He thought he was in love. Josephine de Beauharnais. She was 6 years older, a widow, had 2 children, and Napoleon became completely obsessed with her the moment he first saw her. "I love you," he told her on their first meeting. "I will marry you." Josephine had laughed. "You don't even know me. I know you with everything I am," Napoleon had said. "I cannot live without you." But Josephine knew. This wasn't love. This was an obsession. Napoleon didn't love her. He wanted to possess her, just like he wanted to possess Europe. They got married. There was no honeymoon, because Napoleon had to go to war in Italy. But he wrote to her every day, 2, 3, sometimes 4 letters a day. "Josephine, I cannot breathe without you. Don't wait for my return. I win every battle for you. I cannot go even a second without thinking of you." Josephine would read these letters and throw them aside, because she didn't love Napoleon. She loved his power. And in Paris, while Napoleon was fighting in Italy, Josephine was dancing with other men. Perhaps more, perhaps much more. When Napoleon heard this, he went mad. But he didn't show his anger. He just buried it inside. And that buried anger slowly spread like poison through his entire body. "She cannot betray me," he whispered to himself one night in his tent. "If she betrays me, I will destroy her. But first, I will destroy myself." When Josephine returned home, Napoleon's eyes had changed. He now looked at her not with love, but with suspicion. "Did you cheat on me?" he asked. "No," said Josephine. She was lying. They both knew it. But Napoleon chose to believe, because accepting the truth was a pain he couldn't bear. And from that moment on, a crack formed in Napoleon Bonaparte's heart. A small crack, but over time it would grow, expand, and eventually become large enough to destroy everything. But Napoleon wasn't aware of this, because now he was busy with something else, conquering Egypt. So why Egypt? Because Napoleon wasn't just conquering land. He was searching for immortality. And where is immortality? In the depths of history, in the shadow of the pharaohs. "I will be like Alexander," he told his generals. "I will conquer the world." But Egypt was a disaster. Half his army was lost in the desert. Nelson destroyed the British fleet, and Napoleon felt it for the first time, perhaps defeat. That night he sat in the shadow of the pyramids, alone, and asked himself a question. Even if I conquer the world, can I conquer Josephine's heart? The answer was painfully simple. No. The coup, birth of the Emperor Napoleon, secretly returned to Paris. Nobody was expecting him. The government was on the verge of collapse. France was in chaos. "We need a savior," said Barras. "I am here," said Napoleon. The coup of 18 Brumaire was a comedy. When Napoleon entered the assembly, angry deputies attacked him. They tore his robe. They tried to strangle him. "Death to the dictator!" they shouted. Napoleon fled. Outside, he shouted to the soldiers, "They're trying to kill me inside! Save the Republic!" The soldiers broke down the assembly's door. Deputies escaped through the windows, and Napoleon Bonaparte became France's new leader. But one night, looking at himself in the mirror, he couldn't recognize his face. "Who am I?" he whispered. "A hero or a traitor?" The mirror didn't answer, but Napoleon heard the answer from the voice inside. Both. As first consul, his first task was this: appear less dependent on Josephine. But he couldn't. Every night he had to be with her. Otherwise, he couldn't sleep. "Do you still love me?" he asked one night. "Yes," said Josephine. She was lying again. And again Napoleon chose to believe, because the truth was this. Napoleon Bonaparte could bend all of Europe to his will, but he couldn't force a woman to love him, and this was slowly driving him mad. The peak. The man who brought the world to its knees, Notre Dame Cathedral. The Pope himself had come to crown Napoleon, but at the critical moment, Napoleon took the crown from the Pope's hands and placed it on his own head. "I owe nobody," he seemed to say. "I took my own crown." But that night, when he was alone in the palace, the crown felt very heavy on his head. He took it off and placed it on the table, looked at it. It was made of gold, precious stone, but it was empty inside. "What have I won?" he whispered. "A crown. But am I happy?" He knew the answer. No. Austerlitz, 1805, Napoleon's greatest victory. 3 emperors were fighting, Austria, Russia, France, and Napoleon defeated them all. "The sun has risen," he shouted on the battlefield, "and I am God." But that night he cried in his tent, because thousands of men had died, and all of them had died by Napoleon's command. "Is it worth it?" he asked himself. "All this death, all this blood, is it worth it?" And the voice inside answered, "To be immortal, everything is worth it." Josephine could no longer have children. Napoleon needed an heir, so he divorced her. That night Josephine cried. Napoleon didn't cry, but he was shattered inside. "I loved you," said Josephine. "I know," said Napoleon, "but love isn't enough. I need a son who will leave me an imperial legacy." Josephine left, and Napoleon was completely alone. He married Austrian Princess Marie-Louise, young, beautiful, obedient, a perfect empress. But Napoleon couldn't fall in love with her, because he had left his heart with Josephine. He had a son, Napoleon II. He had secured his legacy. But was he happy? No. Moscow, the beginning of the end. Napoleon made his biggest mistake. He decided to invade Russia. "Why?" asked his marshals. "Russia is already weak, not a threat." "Because," said Napoleon, "there is one place on the map that isn't mine, and I want everywhere." He set out with 600,000 soldiers, the largest army Europe had ever seen. But the Russians retreated, city by city, village by village. They burned everything. When Napoleon entered Moscow, the city was burning. "I won," said Napoleon, but around him there was only ash. The Russian Tsar rejected the peace offer. Winter was coming. Napoleon was forced to retreat, and the retreat turned into a nightmare. Freezing cold, hungry wolves, Cossack cavalry. Every day, thousands of men were dying. Napoleon sat on his horse watching silently. His eyes were empty. "They're all dying because of me," he whispered. "But I cannot stop, because stopping means dying." Of 600,000 men, only 20,000 were able to return to France. When he returned to Paris, nobody greeted him. The streets were silent. That night he was alone in the palace. He wrote a letter, but he didn't know to whom to send it. The letter said, "I won the world, but I lost myself. I made history, but I couldn't find happiness. Everyone knows my name, but nobody knows me." He burned the letter. And that night, Napoleon Bonaparte thought about dying for the first time in his life. But it wasn't the end yet, because the greatest fall had not yet come. The end. Death in exile, Waterloo, 1815. Napoleon fought his last battle and lost. Wellington defeated him. The Prussians crushed him, and Napoleon surrendered. "Kill me," he said. "It would be better than exile." But they didn't kill him. They exiled him to the island of St. Helena, to the most remote corner of the world, in a small house, 2 rooms, damp. Napoleon lived here for 6 years and died a little more each day. In the mornings, he would look at the ocean from the window. "Once every part of this ocean was mine," he would say. "Now I'm a prisoner on a tiny island." In the evenings, he would tell stories of old battles, but there was nobody listening, just a few officials, and they didn't care either. At night, he couldn't sleep, because he had nightmares. The burning cities in Moscow, the dying men at Waterloo, Josephine's receding face. "My God," he cried one night, "why did you give me this punishment?" God didn't answer. Napoleon Bonaparte died. He was 51 years old, according to official records, from stomach cancer. But the truth was this: he died of a broken heart. His last words were these: "Josephine, head of my army, attack. Then he fell silent, and the man who brought the world to its knees died on an island nobody cared about, forgotten and alone. Epilogue: The Unforgotten Ghost. Today, Napoleon's tomb is in Paris, at Les Invalides, a magnificent, giant red marble sarcophagus. Tourists take photos, guides narrate, but nobody knows. The man lying inside that sarcophagus was never actually buried, because Napoleon Bonaparte's soul still isn't there. He's still at St. Helena, in that small house, looking at the ocean from the window, still waiting for Josephine to come back, still dreaming that one day everyone will remember him. And the most tragic truth is this: Napoleon Bonaparte achieved immortality. His name made history. Everyone knows him, but he never learned to be happy, because he knew how to conquer the world, but he didn't know how to conquer his heart. And perhaps the greatest victory, the greatest conquest, is not of others, but of oneself. Napoleon understood this too late. Will you understand?